I'm Mike Thornton. This is a very special edition of Public Process. We are joined by, I think, the person who was the first or second guest on Public Process. It wasn't all that long ago. And unfortunately, he is now the former editor of the Triplicate newspaper. Robin Fornoff, thank you for joining us on KFUG today.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. That's a lot better.
Yeah.
Operator error on my part. So Robin, you're here. There's been a lot of development, I think incredibly important to the community as a whole. The Triplicate has been sold and bought, sold by Western Communications, bought by Country Media. And I guess there are several things I want to ask you about, but let's start with the actual transition, because what I'm hearing, it was
brutal,
I guess. Yeah. Thank you for saying it that way. Yeah. Talk about what happened and how all of you found that and what happened in the newsroom.
All right. So about a month ago, when Country Media offered to purchase, they showed up. They bought the Triplicate and the Curry Pilot in Brookings, which I was editor of both. They showed up first in the morning at the Curry Pilot and made this speech about how this bankruptcy was the fault of the employees, which it wasn't. Both newspapers continue to make money. The problem has always been with the Western Communications. Anyway, they said, we have a model, we stick to it, and there are going to be changes. And that was basically it. I met with them with the other managers. Of course, we went around the room and gave a little thumbnail sketch of what we did. And I went on about how we considered ourselves journalists, we're reporters and not repeaters. We're not stenographers. We go to a meeting, we ask questions and try to write stories of whatever happened there, how it's relevant to our readers. I couldn't even make eye contact with Mr. Hungerford, Steve Hungerford, one of the two owners.
Right. He and his wife, as I understand.
I might as well have been talking to a wall. And I just went back. Then they later came to the Triplicate in the afternoon and did the same thing. So the next day I thought about it, and I just told, because I looked at their model. They own like 7 or 8 small weeklies up the coast in Oregon. And if you go to their website and look at those, they're not doing journalism. They're publishing, people send in press releases and they just publish them word for word. They don't vet it. Or somebody has an opinion, they'll run it as a news story in the paper. So I just I told both staffs, I says, you better dust off your resume and the other thing is that we noticed was they don't have like one reporter in the newsroom. That's it. At the time, the Triplicate had 5, Pilot had 4. Anyway, so we hear nothing from them or Western for that matter for weeks until last Friday. HR person from Western showed up and told Jessica Sanar and myself that they weren't going to offer us a new position with the company.
So I just want to be clear. Mm-hmm. Country Media didn't even have the courtesy to let you go themselves.
No.
They basically had the outgoing company be their hatchet person for them. Okay.
Exactly. So the axe fell. And it wasn't unexpected. I was expecting it. From the get-go when we knew we were up for sale, publisher Kim Fowler and I had talked, and she said, that we're both the two most vulnerable people here. And I said, yeah, I know. But, that's the job. I serve at the will. They could fire me any day. But they had no interest in doing journalism. And then, so I just left. told me to pack my things and leave, and so I did. And then Monday, Steve and Carol Hungerford, the new owners, Country Media, brought their model in, and everybody had to reapply for their jobs. All but one person in the triplicate newsroom said, nope, not going to do it. We're out of here. And the same at the pilot. Yeah.
So I know you, Jessica. It sounds like Tony Reed is now gone as well.
They out of vindictiveness because of what Tony had written in Saturday's paper after I left. They didn't offer him a position at all.
So just to remind our listeners, so all of this happens. Tony Reed, one of the reporters, writes a piece basically saying, hey, this is not cool. And if they don't want to do journalism and run a paper the way a paper should be run, the rest of us are probably going to walk too.
Right.
And so when they let you and Jessica go outright, which makes I can understand your position. Hey, we're going to make a change. We've got our own person, but then you've got, like, in my opinion, probably your absolute best local reporter. And it's like, you're out the door too with your Annenberg fellowship. I mean, it's like, that made no sense to me when I heard that. Yeah. So it sounds like, they let you go. They told the other people they could apply for their jobs. And then they rescinded that offer when it comes to Tony Reed, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. It's the death of journalism in Del Norte County. Almost 150 years of the Del Norte Triplicate doing news is not going to happen from now on.
We're speaking with Robin Fornoff, the former editor of the Triplicate newspaper and the Curry Pilot. We're talking about the sale of the papers from Western Communications to a company called Country Media. You are tuned to KFUG Crescent City. This is Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton. So, Robin, you just said the death of journalism in Del Norte County.
Yes.
So my guess is there's going to be some people going, oh, well, that's hyperbolic, right? Is it hyperbolic, or are we really talking about the death of journalism?
No, it's not. They have no intention of doing journalism. They first of all, you need reporters.
That helps
to do journalism. Yeah. The only one that's left is Michael Zog, who's a very good sports person. He can write hard news, but he's one person. Who's going to go to the city council meetings and the county commission meetings and the school board meetings and hold those folks accountable? That's just not going to happen anymore. Likely, they will have a school board member write an account of what they're doing. Well, it's pretty, that's not news.
No, that's stenography is what that is.
Exactly.
Well, and it was really interesting because I was reading something, I'm assuming it was written by Mr. Hungerford. I don't know whether it was or not. Maybe it was his wife. I can't remember. But, basically saying, oh, well, we're going to come into the community and ask the business community.
Ask the business
community, what is it that you want us to do, more or less?
Right.
That does not sound like journalism to me. And as I understand it, I mean, Country Media is buying up papers in Oregon. They've bought papers in the upper Midwest. I think she may have run for like Secretary of State in Oregon.
Yes.
And I don't know. It just, so I was reading something that they were talking about another paper that they took over. I want to say in Montana. That may or may not be right. And they said they took it over from, I guess, a family that had owned it, the Steeles.
Right.
Okay. So you know where I'm going with this.
I'm vaguely familiar with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, well, the Steeles will be watching. And in essence, meaning, well, we have to do a good job because, we have this tradition to uphold. I'm hearing you say that that's not going to happen here. It's and who's watching here to make sure that it does?
There's nobody here to watch and make sure it does. They have no intention of doing that. Their customers are advertisers because that's how they make money. and they're not going to allow any kind of story that might offend an advertiser. We've done that before, and every publisher I've ever worked for, so if it's news and it's factual and it's fair, then we'll run it. Even if when it does mean the advertiser is going to pull their advertising, because this is what we do. That's not going to happen here. I
was at the YTA class yesterday. Jessica was there as well. And we were talking with the young people about journalism. And I was giving an example of when I worked as a radio news reporter and news director. We had a local co-op and there was some stuff going on there, and I was reporting on it. They were also a major underwriter for the radio station. Mm-hmm. And my station manager came to me and said, hey, Mike, underwriter. And I said, look, if you're telling me to not cover this legitimate news story, that's fine. Just say it right out and then realize that I'm going to hand you my letter of resignation.
Right.
Because you can't do that. You're not doing reportage if you're worried about pleasing the advertisers and the people with money in the community, because they're the ones that need to be held accountable.
There you go. That's exactly it. So, and that's just not going to happen now. And I don't know. It's just, it's disheartening. Especially, whatever financial problems Western Communications had. They were the polar opposite of that. We do news. We're journalists. We may write things that offend people, but that's just the way it is. Sorry. It's the truth. Even if it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. And that's just not going to happen with these folks.
We're speaking with Robin Fornoff, former editor of the Triplicate newspaper and the Curry Pilot. You are tuned to KFUG Crescent City. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process, 21 minutes past the top of the hour on this Tuesday afternoon. Robin, I'd like to go back to something you said when we first started. And you said that they blame the employees for the financial problems of the company.
Yes.
Did they amplify on that? Did they give an example of why that was?
No. And for the other issues, as I say, the death of journalism, and a part of the reason the rest of the newsrooms walked, Monday when they made offers, when they reapplied for their jobs, was how they were being treated. And Tony outlined that in the story. It's just, they're very dictatorial. It's this way or the highway, and they're not going to listen. If you ask a question, they get offended. It's just, they're not nice people.
Well, and this leads me to something, and you can tell me if I'm off base, okay?
Okay.
You've actually worked in other newsrooms.
I've been doing this for almost 50 years.
That's right. And you've worked in like real papers like the Detroit Free Press and things like that. And we had talked earlier that we both knew someone in common there, Damon Hartley.
Damon, yeah.
Yeah. and so I think sometimes with these kinds of things, they think they're coming into, we're just coming into some little podunk town that's got, a podunk news team who doesn't know nothing.
Very impression I got.
Okay. Talk more about that, if you will.
Well, that was the attitude that kept coming across. And we have, regardless of where I've been in my experiences, which are many and varied, but we have some of the finest journalists I've worked with. Tony Reed, is just top notch. Jessica Sanar, she's in addition to that fellowship, I can't remember the guy's name. It was the executive director of Rural Human Services, but she is the one who documented, in a series of stories how he was allegedly sexually harassing the help. And basically those stories forced his resignation.
And I actually knew one of those people who had claimed harassment, and that turned out to all be pretty well validated by the time it was said and done. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's the kind of important local journalism that people need to be doing.
Right. And Boyd Allen at the Curry Pilot, right after about 2 years ago, they made me editor of the Pilot as well, and he was the one. He's a retired high school journalism teacher, and he just took the job, and started covering the port of Brookings Harbor. And said, "There's something wrong down there, Rob." And I said, "All right, let's start pulling documents and asking questions." And we did a series of stories that eventually led to a recall of it, all but one member of that port, by documenting the corruption, the outright corruption that was going on. I mean, one board member, his girlfriend was also on the board, and they gave her a sweetheart deal, lower rent than about half of what anybody else was paying in the port to put her business down there. That kind of stuff, and sadly that's not going to happen now.
Well, and as I think about this, it seems to me that it's even more important in small, isolated towns and areas, because CNN and MSNBC and Fox and the Washington Post and the New York Times are not going to be dealing with the things that are happening in these communities. And if we don't have genuine journalism going on, that opens the possibility of many, many problems to not be addressed.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. But if you want to get back, you're coming in and thinking that you're working with some unsophisticated reporters, writers is just wrong. Some of the best people I've ever worked with.
I was really impressed by the series on homelessness that Tony was doing.
Yes.
And, I know you're going to, push this aside, but I'm pretty sure that Tony wouldn't have been able to put all that time into that if you hadn't have given the go-ahead for that to happen and say, go ahead and put those resources and your time into doing those stories. And so when I was saying to folks, wow, this is really cool, we should be thanking Tony, I think, I said we should also be thanking Robin as well, because without the two of you, it wouldn't have been happening.
Well, that's true. And I've always, since I arrived here 4 years ago, it's been a concern. It's a major issue for this area, homelessness. And aside from the moral issue, I mean, I still can't imagine how anybody thinks it's right that somebody is sleeping outside, doesn't have a home. I mean, in Delaware County, we have, and the school has a different standard, but we have over 100 kids who are homeless. That could mean they're couch surfing with friends, they're living in a car, with their mother, or whatever's going on. But it astounds me that that's acceptable, and it's not. So when Tony said, I know your concerns, and we said, all right, because we have limited resources then, as most newspapers do these days. And I said, all right, we'll cut some time out and let's do it. And so we did.
Yeah. And did a really, really good job of it too.
And that's Tony. He always does a good job.
Yeah. We're speaking. So let me be transparent and lift the curtain here at the KFUG radio station. In addition to doing this interview, Robin is also entertaining my chocolate lab, who is relentless when it comes to wanting attention from guests at KFUG. So Robin's doing double duty here. He's talking with us and also keeping Taylor entertained.
I have a golden retriever. Yeah. He's the same way. So
yeah.
It's like, I love dogs.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I guess the question I want to ask Robin is, immediately I saw some people on Facebook applauding
My departure.
Well, yes. You know what? I really like the fact that we're just going to get right to the chase. I like that. And the purge has begun. Hooray!
Hell yeah.
I'd like to get your thoughts about that because I know who these people are. You know who these people are. Pretty much everybody knows who these people are.
Yes.
What is their problem?
Their problem is they would have unlimited access to the pages of the newspaper to promote their own agendas, and we don't allow that. There's a place you want to write a letter to the editor, fine. You want to write a op-ed opinion piece, you get one a month. And but the danger of what's going to happen now is it doesn't take these people long to figure out they might be obnoxious, but they're very smart. And guys like Roger Gitlin and Bob Berkowitz will be happy. You'll be reading something from them every time they publish. Their poison, their skewed view of how things should be. That's what's going to happen.
Well, and let me ask this, okay? Because I think it could be both and, right? Mm-hmm. On the one hand, you have a skeleton staff that even if it wanted to, can't go really out and really report news. So it's dependent upon submitted content.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what will happen, of course, is that these people who are ready and willing to submit content, now they have almost a captive organ in order to do that because the new paper, whatever it's going to be, under Country Media, that's their business model.
Yes, absolutely. That is. And it's, it's sad. It's very sad. It's a sad day, in Delaware County and Curry County as well. This is, we're not the only source of news, but, we have ethics. We have, standards that are pretty much, the model for anywhere in the country. We abided by them. That's not going to happen. This goes out. And if some people say, well, newspapers are on the way out, and the model itself is the problem. It's the failing business model. You can't, you sit and you watch. Your main source of income is advertisers. And you sit and you watch every year, a few leave and a few more leave and a few more leave, because you can't compete with Facebook and Google. I've talked with folks that I respect in the business, and we've gone, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it has to change. It has to change in order for, local news to survive. Real, legitimate news. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that we're all going to have to go digital sooner or later, probably sooner than later, because you're eliminating the costs of having to print paper, pay a crew, your printing costs. One of the things that in the 4 years that I've been there, especially to Western Communications, and John Costa was the president and CEO, and we would talk about, how about this? Why don't we start a nonprofit arm so we could go out and get grants? Because as long as you're a for-profit model, you can't get grants,
right?
But in fact, we had, I think it was Wild Rivers or somebody that had asked us a couple different times, could they give us whatever a reporter's salary is for a year pay them, and they would specialize in something like education, covering education. We tried to figure out how to do it, but they wouldn't do it. It's not the business model. We're a for-profit company, and we're going to make it or not based on this. And well, you see, they eventually went bankrupt.
Well, let me ask you this, because my understanding is Lost Coast Outpost is moving into the area as well.
Yes.
Jessica, in fact, has been hired by them. She was unemployed for, I guess, a grand total of 7 minutes.
That's how good she is. Yes.
So, I mean, in all transparency, at one point, I was an employee for Humboldt Area Foundation. Patrick Cleary was the executive director. Patrick Cleary is behind Lost Coast Outpost and several radio stations in Humboldt. Can they do the job? I mean,
can they do the job the way the triplicate was doing it?
Yeah,
not with one person.
Okay.
It takes more. See, the unfortunate thing is if you're going to do this, you need people. That's your big cost. And you need good people like Jessica. Jessica will do more than a superb job covering Delaware County for the Lost Coast Outpost. I have no doubt in my mind about that. But she'll be one person versus 4, what we used to have. Her specialty was education. She covered the hell out of the school system, and more social kind of issues like that. And she's very good at that. So yeah, you just can't do it with one person.
Well, and I guess, so that was part A of that question. Part B is, can they provide something ideally that will allow for some sort of real journalism to be taking place in this community while country media is doing whatever it's doing? I guess that's what I'm asking as well.
I think that they would be the ones doing that, because countries simply can't. They're not going to do it. They don't have the people to do it. They have one person in the newsroom, and that person's going to spend most of their time. If they're going to remain twice a week, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to take their business model for all the other papers. They publish once a week on Friday, and they don't deliver it to homes. They put it in the mail and mail it to you. So by the time you get it, it's already 3 or 4 days old. But here's the thing. The one person left in that newsrooms on whatever day it is has 22 pages to fill. Even if they did write 2 stories a day, which is difficult, they still have to take the time to actually do the work of putting it, getting on the computer and building a page and finding copy to fill 22 pages. It's not an easy task. It's a very time consuming task. And so that one person's not going to have a hell of a lot of time to do any reporting.
Well, which then makes this publishing whatever is submitted a necessity, because you can't fill up the paper unless you're doing that. And then the people and organizations that have the time and the resources to submit that stuff.
Yes.
That's what's going to get covered. That becomes the news. That becomes the reality, because there's nobody digging behind it.
There you go. That's exactly it. It takes time. It takes, smart people. And, Michael Zog, I love him to death. He is a hell of a reporter, whether it be sports or news, but he only has so much time. And he's the guy left. They'll maybe fill it up with wire copy from Associated Press. I don't know how long they'll keep that contract if they use it. But I'm waiting to see if they use it, because it was, we were contracted through Western Communications with the Associated Press. If they use AP wire copy in tomorrow's paper, if they get a paper out, they then assume that contract, and that's about $50,000 a year. That's what it costs, and they have an AP requires a 2-year notice to cancel, so they'll be stuck with that cost. But that's what you'll get. You'll get wire copy from stories all over the country or the world, and you'll get propaganda from guys like Berkowitz and Gitlin on their take on on whatever issue they want you to be concerned about. Yeah, it's not quite a shopper. You know what a shopper is.
Oh, yes, I do, actually, yes.
Just all advertising.
Right.
And some...
but usually shoppers don't pretend to be anything other than shoppers, right?
Exactly, yeah. But you'll hear, oh, yeah, we're probably they'll write something like, the triplicate's been here for 147 years, and we're going to continue the tradition, blah, blah, blah. But it's so much just words. There's no intention to do. They can't.
We're speaking with former editor of the Triplicate and the Curry Pilot, Robin Fornoff. My name is Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. You're tuned to KFUG Crescent City. 20 minutes before the top of the hour on a really nice Tuesday afternoon. Unfortunately, a lot of what we're talking about doesn't come near to matching the brightness of the day. I have my own experience as a news reporter and a news director in radio, not in print.
Right.
And they're different.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know this, that if you don't have legitimate journalism going on, all kinds of nasty things can happen. And it's not necessarily always nasty things because people are evil and devious and corrupt and criminal. Sometimes they're just, isolated and insulated and ignorant and making decisions influenced by the only people they talk to.
Right. Or well-intentioned.
Well-intentioned, yes. Yeah. So let me ask you this, Robin. It sounds like a lot of the problems that are going to happen are unavoidable because they're baked into country media's business model, right?
Yes,
okay. Yes. Is there a political agenda behind the company that you know of or not?
I don't know of any political agenda. It's about money. It's about money. They paid $350,000 just for the business, the two papers. They didn't buy the buildings. They said we wrote a check for $350,000. If somebody bids more, we're not going to be able to match it. We don't go in debt. And that's what they do. They eliminate people. That's your major cost. Cut it down to bare bones and fill pages with submitted copy. And that's how they make money.
So this is, and I want to be really clear. I'm going to ask this question to see if you know any more about it than I do. and that's this. So when I heard about this, I started trying to do some research on country media just to see if I could find out, well, what are they doing and all of that. And I found two things. And one is I don't have the connecting nexus, and I want to be really clear on that. Mm-hmm. But I saw Steve Hungerford's name connected to some legal firm. I mean, not connected, in proximity to, related to streamlining the publication of foreclosure notices. Well, do you know anything about this?
That was going on in Oregon. In fact, Western Communications had joined with some other newspapers to fight it. There was a legal firm that specialized. It was during the crash of '08.
Right.
There was a legal firm that was specializing in foreclosures and making a ton of money off of foreclosures. But part of foreclosure is what's called public notice.
Right.
You have to post a notice of foreclosure, print notice of foreclosure in a newspaper of record. So it gives the public notice that this is going to happen and everybody's aware. Well, the law firm started buying up all these small, hometown newspapers because it was cheaper to just own the paper than pay what it costs to run the public notice ads,
right? The
legal ads, yeah. So and that was their sole purpose. And a bunch of the publishers in Oregon got together and sued them. I think there was finally some kind of a settlement. But.
And that's the case I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So I just want to be clear because I don't want to assign, any responsibility for anything to anybody who doesn't deserve it. Is it possible that Hungerford was part of the group suing the thing?
No, I'm not. I read a couple of stories as I did my research on it, and somebody was writing about what had happened, and they just asked him because he was a publisher of a newspaper, and he gave some innocuous answer, but he was not involved.
Okay, I just wanted to be really clear on that, that he was not involved in this.
No.
And then the other thing that I was looking at was a paper that was written, an academic paper that was written quite some time ago about something called Afghanistanism, which also had a Stephen Hungerford tied to it. And so Afghanistan, which I agree with the premise of this academic paper, which is people get really excited and involved and wrapped up in like crisis and drama that's going on really far away. And then they use that as an excuse to not focus on what's happening in their own communities.
Oh, I see.
You know, and there was a Stephen Hungerford whose name was also connected to that. And I'm wondering if it was the same guy.
I have no idea. I didn't run across that, but I don't know that much about them. I've had very limited conversation with them. It was very clear that I wasn't going to be around once they got control. I think they're probably nice people, but they have a business model, and it works, and that's what they're going to do. It makes money for them, and that's what you get.
And I mean, really, that's really in many ways the crisis of journalism as a whole.
It is, yes.
Because there was a firewall between news and the business model.
Yes.
That has now, it seems, been completely wiped away, and particularly here in Del Norte. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's going to drop. There's not going to be any, and that's part of the reason the two newsrooms walked. They just didn't want to be a part of that, and I'm really relieved that myself personally that didn't make me an offer, because I didn't want to have to sit there and tell them, I've worked way too hard and too long to get involved in something like this. I'm just not going to do it.
So that leads, two questions. Let me remind the listeners we're talking with Robin Fornoff, former editor for The Triplicate and the Curry Pilot. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. You're tuned to KFUG, Crescent City, California, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. So, Robin, what, if anything, can the people of this community do about this? You're going to go do whatever you're going to do, and I want to talk with you about that in a minute.
Okay.
But, what can the people of this community do in order to try to make sure that we're getting real news coverage here?
The one thing that I can tell you, and you know this, publishers, owners of newspapers, TV stations, radio stations, do pay attention when people aren't happy with their product. And the best thing that anyone here can do is just contact Steve or Carol Hungerford and let them know you're not happy with this product. And if they don't start doing real journalism, you'll have nothing to do with it. That's the main thing. Yeah. Public response.
Voting with your pocketbook.
Exactly.
That's always a very powerful thing. And so I guess the other thing, Robin, there's many things, but, if we can, so what's the immediate future for you?
I don't really know. Actually, Joni, my wife, and I are in a pretty good position financially. We don't owe any money. My former publisher in New Mexico has been trying for several weeks to get me to go back there, and we don't really want to go back. And it's not because I wouldn't enjoy working with him. He's a finance editor. That newspaper is in Clovis, New Mexico. It's called Eastern New Mexico News now. They were newspaper of the year in the state of New Mexico 2 years ago. And he wanted me to come back and do some investigative kind of stuff like I did there before. And that's always been my specialty. But I just don't know. What I'm going to do is spend the next couple of weeks just taking it easy. My blood pressure's gone down about 20 points.
I'll bet it has.
And Joni and I were talking, and I said, well, maybe it's time to put up or shut up and set up a nonprofit web page that does a public service kind of reporting for both Del Norte and Curry County, funded by grants. So maybe that's a possibility. I just don't know.
It's interesting that you say that. In the community I used to live in, which is Nevada City, Grass Valley area of California, there was somebody who did exactly that. They created a web-based news site called Ubanet and wound up, obviously, it's a lot of work, but turned it into a really, really effective and viable news venue and outlet, particularly there related to fire coverage and things like that. So that kind of thing has been done and can be done. And, if you decide to stick around and not go to New Mexico, I hope you'll consider doing something like that.
We don't, I've always said I never plan to retire. I would probably die in the newsroom. I just love doing it so much. And Joni and I, when we moved here, we said this is probably going to be our last move. Why don't we move to Paradise? We love this area. We would leave it very reluctantly. If I had a good enough offer, I'd probably go somewhere. But we wouldn't sell the house. We just rent it or something, and then. Eventually, when I run out of gas, come back here. But it's as simple as I don't know what we're going to do. Joni was one of the casualties too. She was in front office at the Triplicate, and she just, they offered her less money than she was making. And she just said she wanted to hear him out, that she wouldn't feel right working there at all after what they'd done to me. So,
right.
But anyway, we're having a good time at home relaxing.
So, you said something, and and if you can, I'd like to explore it a little bit more. I think I understand it. When you said, I just probably planned on just dying in the newsroom because I love it so much.
Yes.
What do you mean when you say that?
Oh, I can't imagine. Somebody actually pays me money to do this. It's the best life I could have ever had. And I've been doing it, like I said, for almost 50 years. Sometimes every once in a while you get to do a story that actually helps some person or some organization or some cause. Really makes a difference. An example, when I was at the Detroit Free Press, we did a series on the prison system, which at that point was basically, it was so overcrowded, they had a policy, the state prison board had a policy of one in, one out. Well, and they weren't really particular about who went out. And some of these folks were violent people,
right, yeah,
who were victimizing other people with their violence, of murder, rape. And we documented all that in a series of stories, and the legislature changed the entire prison board and their priorities and said, we can't do this. That kind of stuff. There are plenty of other stories I could tell you, but that's just an example.
Oh, I'm sure there are. And
yeah.
Actually, I'd like to have you come in sometime and have you tell us all those stories. We've been speaking with Robin Fornoff, former editor of the Triplicate and Curry Pilot. Robin, any final words for our audience today?
I don't know. I would just say, if what I believe is going to start happening with the Triplicate and the Pilot does start happening, if it's not news, if it's just submitted copy, that, you know, there's still a publisher there. Just start demanding that it turn into news again. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would throw in support those entities, whatever they may be, who are actually making an effort to do news for the community, because without your support, they will either change what they're doing or they will cease to be doing anything.
There you go.
Robin Fornoff, thank you so much for coming in today. I'm really saddened and disheartened that this has happened, the way it's happened, and for the chasm that it looks like news coverage in Del Norte County could fall into unless some other entity or organization steps up to do it well. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.